Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors to order on Tuesday, October 29th at 9 a.m. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
If I pressed no one.
Thought about it. Not here? Yeah.
Jonathan.
I'm waiting for more time so I can get paid more money.
Good luck
21
with that.
present, no absence. Presentation of the agenda.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 5 will be delayed till next month. Rod could not be here today. Correspondence, you notice you have the unassigned fund balance. If there's any questions about that. And number 7, public comment. Does anybody in the audience care to make a public comment?
Good morning, Don Fricks, 8305 Quarter Line Road, Fish Creek. Just looking at the mission statement, missions, values, and strategic priorities on the front page of the county website, and it was adopted January 26, 2010, and a resolution. So I'm wondering if it isn't time for some kind of special review of the mission statement and to have a discussion with members of the public, maybe a citizen advisory group, and kind of review what's, I mean, I got a red pencil out and I marked up a whole bunch of stuff. I think there's some shortcomings and some questions about definitions of things that could be reviewed, and 10 years is a good anniversary. So part of what I'm looking at here is, respect, treat people as you'd like to be treated. I've heard some from committee chairs coming to citizens during meetings, making some kind of abusive comments towards the people, and a few other things. And then I'd like to understand how a citizen gets a response from the county board, other than I think once I had a response from supervisor about why we needed to cut public comment from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, and why we've eliminated reporting what people said during public comment in the minutes anymore. So, I mean, I don't think that's a really people-friendly response to, according to this. So anyway, that was an idea for today, and I have another meeting that I need to attend. I wish I could stay around, but I needed to get here to just bring that up as a suggestion. I'm hoping that the legislative committee will meet and have our state representatives in once a month and maybe take some citizen advisory notes on legislation and how it affects them, and as far as review of the mission statement, review of our relationship with the Economic Development Corporation, and I'm going to again ask the question, and I'm going to label them as corporate lobbyists, because there is no representation for labor on that board, and I'm wondering about the county's relationship with the Door County. I know there's some legal stuff there that needs to be looked at, but that's something that needs to be reviewed and talked about again. So thank you for listening, and you guys have a good day. Sorry I can't hang around.
Thank you, Don. Any supervisor response? Approval of the minutes of September 26th regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any additions, corrections, deletions, grammatical remarks, other errors? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any business updates? We are going to jump down to item number 13 and hear from Erin on the private well sampling program. Surprise, right? Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Morning. I hope you all have a copy of the 2 handouts that were left on your desk. This is about a private well sampling program that the county is involved with. It's a partnership between the Soil and Water Conservation Department, Public Health, and University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. I just wanted to give you an update about the program and offer you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have about it. It's going to get started next week. We've been actively recruiting participants to voluntarily sign up to be part of the program to have their private well tested for bacteria and nitrates. And that's the first handout that says at the top, Door County Private Well Monitoring Program. The purpose of the program is twofold. One, it's for homeowner education and outreach to remind people of the importance of testing their well on a regular basis. The 2 parameters we selected are the most common indicators of contamination in wells that people need to be aware of. In Door County, we know groundwater quality changes rapidly, and it's important to test your well. One test from some years ago is not enough to give you an indication of the quality of the water that you're drinking. The second purpose is to get a picture of groundwater quality across the county, and that relates to the second handout that I've included, where it shows in blue the number of sections where people have voluntarily already registered to participate in the program. We had a really lofty goal of getting 1 well per section, and that's a square mile. This was as of Friday. We have 230 sections covered. Oshkosh extended the registration deadline until tomorrow, so if you know anybody who would be interested in participating, there's still time to sign up. The handout explains how you can sign up. Next week, the public will be invited. The people who are participating can come to a forum, learn about how to sample your well, and what the purpose of the program is. Everybody collects their samples and drops them off next week at designated drop-off locations. By doing that, we've removed one of the barriers, which is getting the samples to the well, getting the samples to the lab for analysis in time. So there's still opportunity. I just wanted to provide that flyer. If you know of somebody who would like to participate, please share it with them. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
In the past, when these kind of studies were done, one of the questions that I had as a now retired town board member was people were hesitant to participate because they were concerned that their name would be attached, visible, exposed.
Correct.
What is the status with this testing effort, and can you clear that up?
So by having UW Oshkosh being the lead of the project, they are the ones who are communicating directly with people. So the information that we see at the county is similar to this. The data is not going to be released in a way that personally identifiable information is readily available. UW Stevens Point has a well quality viewer, which is a really nice interactive website where you can go zoom in. The data is represented either on a township level or on a section scale, but that's the finest detail in which it's presented. And so we are not receiving data that is tied to anybody's individual address or in a way that we will know whose well is tied to which result. If somebody has an issue with their well and they want to follow up with it, they are more than welcome to contact Public Health and Soil and Water, and we'll follow that, but that's up to the individual homeowner.
Okay, and because the university system is a public entity and their raw data, who can have access to the raw data?
That would be up to the university to review and individuals to request through the open records. So there is potential for data to be released, depending on how the university views that. But for us, we felt it really important to work with the university because they are the ones who will be maintaining the data and ensuring that we're handling the data appropriately.
And not to indicate that I think there is a problem, but I wanted to make sure that was clear, because there are some people that still feel, in the past, I know that I'm not aware of any data ever getting out. But I wanted to make sure that if some people had some questions, they knew that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Joe?
Who does the actual testing, the UW Oshkosh students?
Yes.
And they'll be coming up to people's places to do it?
Oh, excuse me. They will be running the samples at the lab. The individual person with the well will be collecting the sample and dropping it off at the location. And so in the forum, they'll learn how to properly collect that
Well, that was my
sample.
question, because I do water samples every month, and frankly speaking, it's a pain in the ass. So, there's gotta be an educational factor to let people know how to do this, because it's a joke at the end of the day. I mean, it's a pain what the DNR requires for businesses. And if people aren't told how to do it properly, it's a waste of time and money on everybody's part. So there's a big factor on this that people need to understand.
That's right. So that's why there's an educational forum component at the front end so that people know this is how I need to collect the sample. For bacteria and nitrates, it could be less onerous than some of the other parameters. If you're testing for metals, you have to take it first thing in the morning when the water has been
12
sitting.
hours to get it in.
And on and on. For bacteria and nitrates,
My parents.
it's not that onerous. You have to run the water for 5 to 15 minutes and then collect the sample in the one bottle.
Susan?
When we were up at the island several days ago, I talked to one of the island people, and he told me his son does the testing on Washington Island, and almost half of them test bad. Why is Washington Island not in this study?
So we have been actively recruiting people to volunteer to sign up for the program. And so nobody from Washington Island has signed up for the program yet. And we recognized that we had some gaps. And so what we did was a targeted mailing to one randomly selected well in each of the blank areas. And so we sent those letters out inviting people to participate. And by doing so, we're attempting to recruit as many people to participate as we can.
'Cause that was pretty alarming when he said his son tests water, and a lot of them test bad up there.
Can I comment? You're right, and part of the problem is up there is logistics, it's time. Because of the time you take the sample to the time you get it, I dropped off a water sample test this morning at the Ephraim Well Water Facility that I was required to turn in by the end of the month. You got, from the time you take it till you get it to the lab, if you have to mail it, I'm fortunate I was able to drive down here and deliver it today for $25. The one you're talking about, David Small Plumbing, they send it to Appleton to get tested. They have a courier that comes up and pick it. It's $100 to get it taken down and done. So, this, for the island's a whole different animal, so.
The timing issue.
It's a timing issue. It's a big deal. It sucks.
Susan?
I just wanted to thank Public Health and Soil and Water and the county in general for doing this. It seemed in watching this over the years, there have been some other limited portions of the county, different testing programs available, and of course, we're all supposed to test our own water, those of us that have wells. But so often when decisions are made, like at the state level, the only county-wide test that was done was in Kewanee, which may or may not be a different animal. We have some similar circumstances, but we also have the fact that our county ordinance is the chapter of the legislature's law. I'm going to be saying this wrong, but the point is we have some teeth with regard to nutrient management, and we had some teeth because we had the program where all of the septic systems are surveyed. So we have programs Kewanee County hasn't had, and I'd really love to see at the end of the day, when these come in, how we compare, having had some interventions. So I'm really glad you're doing this.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, I'll go ahead and put the ask out there that everyone as supervisors share this with their constituents, share this, put the poster up at your community center, like the public health page on Facebook and share that, and just try and spread the word so we can take advantage of what we have available here.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, for Washington Island, maybe you need to go a little bit farther than just sending out targeted letters. Maybe you need to come up with some kind of a program so that people can collect and then make it easier for those collections to be taken to the lab without people trying to figure out how to do it themselves. Maybe your department can come up with something that would be a little bit outside the box.
That's a good point.
Just wanted to add something to this too. It's actually Erin and both Public Health, they did a really nice job, but this is one of those things that actually came out of one of our strategic planning sessions, and we actually put this into the budget. I know we had it in the budget last year, but the timing didn't work out, but we kind of carried it forward, and this is what's kind of going forward with that. So we're hoping that this is kind of setting up a baseline for us. And depending on the results, we're hoping that, again, we can actually define a way to go forward in the future, whether we do additional funding towards this program or not. But I think this is one of the things that we identified at our retreat in terms of a priority for us to look at, and I think it's just nice to see it all come together. So thank you for the county board for the support, because it was part of our budget process in putting this together, so.
I have kind of just like the science and question of it. So if someone's well, fails one of these tests or is at a level that's above what's allowed, and then they test again and they submit, assuming they submit again to the Oshkosh program, does the map show change over time, or does it show once there was ever a bad sample? I don't know if I'm asking that in a way that is understandable, but
Right.
yeah.
So if you're talking about the online viewer that Stevens Point operates, it's my understanding that it shows all of the samples. So it doesn't update to the most recent sample. And by clicking on a particular section, you'll be able to see the history in terms of the number of samples collected and the percentage that test above the particular standard.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Resolution 2019-66, authorized application for an acceptance of financial assistance with George K. Pinney County Park brick wall maintenance. Mr. Ostedt,
Also move.
I'll second that.
Want me to explain it?
please.
Okay, at Penny Park, there's some problems with the end of the dock due to ice, and we want to fix it. And there's a grant that we want to go after, and we want to match it with matching funds, which we have in our fund for fixing, repairing launching sites. Right around $1,300, I think it was. Right. Any other questions I can?
Susan?
And I would just add to that money in that fund is from boat launch fees, so it is not tax levy.
Correct.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
Mr. Chairman, can you get your buzz turned down?
Helen? One more time.
Minutes passed and voted 21 yes. 0 no's. Resolution
It's called mute.
2019-67, approval of gift, grant, and/or donation to the Dark County Sheriff's Office. Joel?
I make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
As the resolution reads, it was a donation from Keller for $2,500 for agencies attending future community initiatives for support law enforcement.
Any questions? Okay, we're going to go to the voter board. Quietly. That's passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Resolution 2019-68, a resolution asking Governor Evers and the Wisconsin State Legislature to apply for a waiver from federal rules excluding institutional stays from Medicare coverage. Helen?
I so move, and it's important to note that this suggestion came from CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. and that the county is responsible to pay for, counties are responsible for paying for not children, not adults over the age of 65, but that middle group, if they need to be sent to a mental health institute. Not all of these people are clients of Human Services, but we are responsible for paying for them. So this is a request from CMS to make some changes in the law so that federal funds would be available to pay for these patients.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? On a voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 2019-68, 20 LIP, WLIP grants in aid to local government applications. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just I was thinking, I've talked to David before the meeting on that anything for the RPC meeting, sorry to get caught off guard there, he would have to handle because I was not there for that meeting.
Dave.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution 2019-69.
Second.
Mariah, if you're in the back? I'll defer to Mariah.
Morning. These are the same 3 grants that we are eligible to apply for every year from the state with regard to the Land Information Office. So there's a training grant. There's another grant that all counties are eligible to apply for. The amounts, I believe, are in your packet. And then there's another grant that is related to how much money to offset the funds that come in from transfers that go through the Register of Deeds. So every county is supposed to have the same amount of money coming in. And basically what these are used for, like I said, the first one, which is relatively small, is for training, and then the other 2 offset costs related to either ongoing maintenance and contracts for LIO-related software, or in this case, last year and this coming year, we're putting in a new system to replace the AS400. So we are more than eating up the grant dollars that we're eligible for. Other projects that it funds are things like, we had new LiDAR flyovers last year, the air photos that we do every couple of years of the county. So it's those type of projects.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a correction on the form itself. In the column of roll call board members, can somebody tell me who Peter Heim is?
Alexis.
Jew, okay. Thank you.
It says Heim Peter.
Huh?
It says Heim Peter.
Oh, Hein Peter. Okay, I was reading Peter first, so I'm sorry.
Anything else? If not, we will go to the voter board. That's passed a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Thank you. Next, my favorite topic. Resolution 2019-70, supervisor compensation and reimbursement. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second from Alexis. I'll try and explain what this was. We had quite a conversation at admin committee last week. There were 2 items to be brought up. The last time we voted on this, we agreed to put not the per diem, we agreed to put a $1,200 limit on registration, hotel, that sort of thing, and then still do per diem after that. And that was reduced from $1,500 to $1,200 on the original motion. So we agreed to that. It came up in conversation since then that there was a loophole that maybe we wanted to close. And the loophole was any supervisor could just take the $1,200 and register for as many conferences or meetings that they wanted to anywhere across the state and not use it for anything except registration and collect per diem. So they could go to 40 conferences if they could fit it in and collect per diem forever. There'd be no limit on per diem. So it was a pursued loophole. So the suggestion was to turn around and to close that loophole would be to just authorize $2,000, which included hotel registration and per diem. Okay? So the supervisor could still go to as many as they wanted, but he or she could choose to accept per diem for those registration or those conferences or not. But they would be limited to a total of $2,000 for the year. So Ken went back and looked, of course, that still fits within what the average cost would be. You're not looking at an cost increase. Still the average cost of what was spent by supervisors over the previous number of years. So the idea would be to change it from a $1,200 plus per diem to change it to $2,000 that included per diem and close the potential loophole of registering for conferences and having unlimited per diem available to you. So that basically puts a cap on the per diem. So that was the discussion. That's what you're being asked to talk about inside there. The second part of that was I don't know if everybody here is familiar with it. If not, we will try and explain the County Ambassador Program. Previously, the County Ambassador Program was lumped into and included in that $1,200 and or the $2,000 that we're talking about today. And the feeling was that we should segregate that out as a separate entity and not include that in the per diem amounts or in the conference registration amounts. That that's a separate program. If you're not familiar with it, what it is, it's operated by the Wisconsin County Association, where each county has an opportunity to name a number of individual supervisors to partake in going down and lobbying for particular issues for the WCA directly with the legislatures, individual members. And the topic is generally picked by the WCA, and talking points are put together, and then dates and times are set up to go talk to the individual legislators and lobby for those particular things. It also prevents an opportunity for those individuals, when they're in front of the individual members, to speak to other local issues that they could bring up if they felt necessary. It's important to point out that what the talking points are things that were agreed to at the Wisconsin Counties Association's business meeting every year. It's like the plank in the platform that they're going to operate on next year. So those are all items that we've agreed to that the counties would lobby the state for, whether it's levy limits or 10,000 other things in between. But it's a program that they have formalized and has become very effective. So we wanted to pull that out of the dollar amount because we felt it was important enough as a county lobbying effort to be able to do that. And the second part of the conversation is we would then take and formalize it after the next election in April when the reorganization meeting takes place. We would take the members that were going to be county ambassadors for that period of time, and they would become members of the legislative committee. So we formalize that as part of the legislative committee moving forward. And that way other people would also have the opportunity to become county ambassadors should they so choose to do that. And if anybody here who is currently a county ambassador would like to add to that explanation, please feel free.
That sounds pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, I mean, being a new supervisor, it's been a great experience and very eye-opening and really, I feel like it's really enriched my understanding of county government and just having that basically added opportunity to go to Madison and meet with our representatives, I think has been, we've already seen some good results from that, so it does seem like a good investment.
Vinny?
I would add to that too, that having the legislators come back to Door County and meet with department heads and meet with committee members about specific things that were talked about on those days as they pertain to like changes and things that can happen in Door County, I think is a really positive part as well. So yeah, it's not just going there, but it's also, had them come here and meet about real change, so.
And it's always more effective if you have the actual people involved in setting the policy, i.e. the supervisors, doing the discussion directly with the legislative members and building those relationships too. It's much easier if you know and you have some type of relationship with those individuals. Susan?
I'm not currently a part of this, but I was in the past. And one of the expectations is that when the 4 or 5 issues that are going to be lobbied on behalf of for that meeting is that we come back to our department heads and take our local data as it applies so that we are giving a snapshot of how our county is affected by that issue, and that hopefully will have more impact and sway our legislators to support things. It's a great program.
Vinnie?
I can just add to that too, that we've been attempting to do that. Sometimes the emails come out, a week, 6-7 days before the event, and then we don't get time to meet with the department heads between going. But I did ask WCA to be sure to email all the talking points, and then we can forward those to department heads and to all the county boards, so you can just be aware of what topics are coming up. And if you want to share any of things that you'd like us to bring as ambassadors, let us know too. So.
And would you explain how many times, like in the previous year, you've been asked to lobby?
How many times the program takes place? 3 times a year.
3 times.
Yeah.
Linda?
If this program, if participation in this program is exempt from the $2,000 limit, are we setting a limit on the number of people that can be involved in this program? Is it always going to be 3, or will other people be intending to join in, or?
That's certainly part of the discussion. This happened for the first time in this last year, and we asked at the beginning of the year anybody who wanted to participate,
Right.
and that's when 3 people offered to become, and that's how we ended up with the 3. I would say we should limit it to 3, and we should look at alternating it on a yearly basis potentially, and change the makeup of the legislative committee as we do that. I mean, it's a way to get involved at the legislative committee, and a way to get involved at the state level.
Just have one thought. I think this is what you had said before, but I think it would maybe be important that if someone wants to be an ambassador, they're on the legislative committee, not just taking the legislative committee and asking if any of them want to be ambassadors, because then if they don't, we don't have any ambassadors. Right. So that would be great.
So, as part of appointing the legislative committee, you would have to already ask for the volunteers that wanted to be the county ambassador for that next term.
Yeah, or I spoke about this very briefly, too, is that, or the county board decides who those ambassadors would be, and they'd be separate from the legislative committee. So that's an option too, I think, instead of just having the chair appointed. But if that would be laid out where it's changed every year, then I would probably for that being on the committee then.
Anybody else? So those are the 2 issues. If we vote on them today, I'd like to vote on them separately, individually. So one would be the county ambassador exclusion, if you will, and one would be the $2,000 limitation on per diem and compensation. Does that make sense?
Does excluding the county ambassador program take away the county ambassador program? Or that would just be included in the $2,000 limit? The program doesn't go away.
The program does not go away, and the program would not be part of the $2,000 limit.
Just want to clarify at this point of order, because we have a motion on the floor for the resolution, which would adopt both. So I just want to make sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Somebody could move to split the question, or?
So if you'd like to do that, we just need a motion to split it. So, because you have a motion on the floor accepting.
So
the
moved.
resolution.
Second.
So we have to vote on the split first.
Yes.
Okay. So this will be, Vinnie.
Just a question. So mileage and per diem and hotel stay are the cost of the ambassador program. There's not a registration, like a conference registration fee. I'm just clarifying that as an ambassador, yeah. We didn't put dollar amounts on that anyway, but just so people know, there's not a separate registration fee to be an ambassador. You're paying for the hotel block, which is usually a pretty good deal, and then your mileage obviously is reimbursed if you're driving, and then your per diem, so.
Susan?
I would add one other thing. While I was doing it, there was one time that a group of people from the Human Services Committee went down, and so we went down in one day, and Mr. Krebsbach used a county van, and so more people could go that weren't part of the ambassador program, because we were all riding together, and the one person being an ambassador got the other ones in, so it was only mileage. So it can be expanded to other people if you do the one-day thing and don't have to stay over.
Okay, so we have a motion. An affirmative vote would be to split it into 2 separate questions to be voted on individually. So by voice vote, all in favor of the split, Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so now we're split it into two separate motions. So we need to re-motion it now?
Right, and if I'm following correctly, the first motion would be something along the lines of increasing the amount allocated from $1,200 to $2,000 and having the per diem for approved conferences, conventions, institutes, schools, seminars, training, or workshops count towards the $2,000 limit that was just established.
So you want to make that motion, Dave?
Well, I got a question.
Sure.
Just looking, and this is purely clerical. County Ambassador Program, underneath which one of the conference, conventions, institutes, schools, seminars, training, or workshops does that fit underneath? To me, that's this is an extension of a normal legislative committee activity.
Which is why we're asking to, when we do the reorganization, move it under the legislative committee and make those members of the legislative committee annually, instead of treating it as a separate per diem expense by individuals.
And that's why I don't see how it fits into this category in the first place. That's what I'm getting at.
Well,
it's not a general county board active activity, so I'm just trying to understand which one this really is. Is it a convention? Is it a seminar? Is it?
I would call it an extension of the committee.
That would be my view.
Right.
So it wouldn't fit underneath this.
Correct, which is why we're trying to separate it out.
So it'd be removed from this list altogether then.
Mhm.
That's the intent at this point in time.
Correct. That confusing, or you got it?
Well, when you list something, that doesn't mean that you're removing it. I'm not interpreting it that way. I'm interpreting it as it being treated as one of those types of items. But because it's one of those types of items, we need to list it as being exceptions. To me, it's a matter of removing it from the list altogether.
Well, you can make that motion, because we'll need a motion on that.
Except that the way he wrote it, the way he recommended it, we're not looking at it as being able to do it that way, right?
And that's actually the second question, working on the
Right.
first question, but yeah. Yeah, the point of the language is to make it crystal clear that the county ambassador program isn't something that's contemplated by the $2,000 limit.
So it's a recognition that
Correct.
that activity is not to be considered part of this activity,
Correct.
as opposed to the presumed fact that it doesn't fit in that category.
Laura?
Okay, so just a question, because we've been gone back and forth on this topic of reimbursement expenses and compensation. So is it the supervisor's responsibility to be tallying their 2,000, or whose responsibility is that going to be?
It would be the
As
supervisor's
administrator.
responsibility. Under this scenario, you could register for a conference and go to it and not charge any per diem.
Sure.
It would be up to you.
So then,
Well, you can distribute your $2,000 per diem and conference and registration fees however you would choose.
so if a county supervisor goes to 2,500 and nobody is tracking that or keeping an eye on that?
No,
Oh, no. that-
administration will track it. So when you
Okay.
submit your vouchers, we'll track it, and we can give you either monthly reports or whatever you guys request, but
So-
we'll track it, what
So
your expenses
your
are.
department will be tracking it?
Yeah, I know that
Or
reimbursements
Jill,
right-
or finance? I can't, since these conversations happen, I hear there's several different departments tracking and looking at things.
Yeah, I think between us, we'll do it, because I know right now everyone submits their reimbursements to that, but it all depends what you guys feel comfortable. I mean, if you want the administration offices to do it, just say it that way, and I can do it. I mean, it'll get submitted through Jill, she can provide it to us, and I'll track it, and I can do monthly reports for everyone, just so you can see where we're at. As far as individually, so that way you can track it, and that way you
So
know where we're at.
this goes back to a conversation that happened a while back about tracking this, keeping a tab on this. It's coming across to me as a hybrid. We were told at one time we can't do hybrids, or is it you just go to salary and be done with it? I mean,
Hybrid.
That's not hybrid.
Right.
It's a bookkeeping thing.
Just a bookkeeping check.
I just want to put out, I should note that the $2,000 limit is a hard limit, and irrespective of who's tracking it, the supervisor can't go over it. So there's not going to be any, nobody told me I was over, so I should get, yeah, it's a hard limit, and so I think the supervisors probably need to track on their own, and
yeah.
double check with administration, but
Right.
At the admin committee, we were told by administration this is a simpler process to track.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand it, but just to make it clear, this $2,000 exclusion does not include assignment to meetings out of town. You're still going to get mileage and per diem for the assignment to an out-of-town
For
meeting.
assigned committee purposes, yes. So if you're on a, like the Leo board, you have other, yes. Right.
The 2,000 does not include that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Linda?
Okay, now I'm more confused than ever. So the $2,000 is not going to, there's other exemptions to that $2,000 limit? Is that what Mr. Burley just said?
Well, any committee that you're on, if it meets somewhere that you're authorized per diem, travel, et cetera, whether it's in county or out of county.
Does that fall under the $2,000?
No.
Well, let's wait, well, yeah, I know what you're saying. Let's just clarify that. There's a distinction, okay, so let's just talk through an example. So LCC is a good one. So LCC, the regular committee meets, but now let's say there's a regional meeting that people want to go do something. That would count as external from the regular committee thing. We do have certain committees, for example, that we don't attend, the Bay Lake Regional Planning Commission or the Leo board or something like that, where they actually meet outside of the county, but that's their regular meeting process. So if you're actually doing a regular meeting, that's what a regular or standard meeting of that board or body, then that is just part of your meeting process and you can claim per diems. But if it's outside the regular meeting process, it's not a standard meeting, in other words, a special meeting where they're doing special training or a field trip or something like that, that is outside the regular duties of the board, and that would be counted against your $2,000.
And if I may say, that's where I believe the county ambassador program belongs. It's outside that, it is a separate known part of the legislative committee, or will become in April.
Right. It will, that'll be defined in the April rules that that'll be part of it, but it'll be excluded from the $2,000.
But because it's currently included, it's got to be worded that way.
Anybody else? Lauren?
So, on average, what are county supervisors, I don't know, where did we get the $2,000 from?
So when it came up as part of the
average, or?
Yeah, so what we did is we actually went through the meeting expenses for legislative days, the annual WCA conference, and then one of the meetings for legislative exchange. So if you included both the per diem along with that, you hit that. It ends up being approximately, depending on what you claim on your expenses, it ends up being around $2,000 for those three activities. So the original intent of so what we tried to do is the original intent of when it was at the $1,200 was to include the 2 WCA events and then plus 1 meeting with the committee or something related to that. So when we adjusted it to include the per diem, we said, okay, what would that same expense be so you could still qualify for those 3 activities, and that's where the $2,000 came from. So it matches what was in the $1,200.
So if we're tracking all this and we already know county supervisors, their averages, why don't just go to salary and be done with it? So then people aren't having to track everything separate, et cetera, and just put a cap on what we had discussed before with traveling expenses. I'm not sure why we keep bringing this forward and adjusting the numbers here and there.
The last time we voted on this, we voted not to do the salary, we went per diem. The next opportunity to change the compensation plan would be next month in the November reorganizational meeting. If somebody wants to bring up a different type of compensation plan, that would be the time to bring it up.
Or we could just do a motion amend
So
now.
if somebody wanted to make that motion next month to go to salary, they open up a whole nother conversation.
Well, we could on the floor now.
I don't think so. If we had to, Grant?
Not have been on the agenda.
yes.
The question was, could somebody make the motion from the floor now to do the salary?
Motion to amend.
There could be a motion to amend the existing resolution, yes. And that could include change in the contemplated compensation versus what we're talking about, the reimbursement of expenses, but that will have to be finally determined at next month's meeting, and I would respectfully suggest we're not prepared to do that today. We just, it wasn't contemplated for today's meeting, and I think would be simpler if somebody wanted to do that, to bring it up at the November 12th annual meeting, where this has to occur and will have to be voted on and approved by a 2/3 vote. So,
David?
And to that fact, I have heard rumors that that is going to be coming at next month's meeting. So we're rehashing stuff right now that might be wiped out at next month's meeting or rediscussed yet again.
It'll be discussed forever for the next 10 years.
I know that. It's just,
We agree on something, we vote on it, and 2 months later, we change it again.
we keep,
So, all I was trying to do with the admin committee was make these 2 changes. And next month, reorganization meeting, if you want to bring it up again and change it entirely, that's fine. Because it's not going to go away. This is going to be a forever ongoing issue and discussion.
in my short window of time, though, I don't think we've had it for like 4 different meetings in 1 year.
It's proven to be very persistent. Typically, in my 23 years here, we've had one resolution and just reaffirmed that at the annual meeting. But again, respectfully suggest that if somebody wants to bring a change like that up for the November 12th meeting, let Ken know in advance so we can have something prepared. Because it's going to be pretty hard to do something on the fly. It's not impossible, we've done it before, but.
Bob?
And I guess, it seems even if we do change something in a month, what we're voting on right now is an improvement and a clarification, and it's, it may be changed, but we're still moving something in the right direction right here today, so.
So, would somebody care to make a motion about the first item, which would be the $2,000?
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? So, do we need majority vote or a 2/3 vote?
2/3.
We need 2/3. David?
So, I'm being anal again. I'm seeing per diem at the bottom in blue, per diem per paragraph 4A. Where's 4A?
That's in the existing.
I know, but it's not up in there right now. So I can't see what that wording is as it applies to this scenario.
It is the status quo in terms of what each supervisor is receiving for compensation, going back to Resolution 2017-70 that was effective April 17th, 2018. So in this resolution, the only thing that we have changed are the blue font and red font, and we haven't changed the compensation as it presently exists. So
Historically, when we reference when we do a change and we reference another section, that original section is also included, so we can compare them and look through and understand what the change actually means in general. What was the other question? Crap, I forget what the other question was.
Was calling for the question. That was
You can.
I thought that was your question.
Oh, I remember the other question. So $2,000 basically adds up for those 3 committees?
Three meetings.
Those 3 meetings?
Correct.
Per diem and expense.
Are we truly saving anything by doing this?
Who knows?
We're setting limits.
We're setting limits, but is anybody exceeding those limits now? If we applied those limits to the last 4 years? I'm not asking for names, I'm just
Yes,
asking if
I'd
it's...
say potentially yes. I don't have the
Potentially.
exact side thing,
Yeah,
but based off, so based off our travel trends for certain areas, I'd say yes. Because if I include the per diem, then yes.
Yes.
I was just going to say it's a perceived loophole, and if somebody wanted to, they could take advantage of it and earn more under the existing
Correct.
versus the changes we're trying to make today.
Anybody else? Go to the voter board, please.
2/3.
Yes,
2/3.
2/3.
With no people?
That is passed 18 yes, 3 no. Thank you. Okay, now we need a resolution for the second part of the motion split, the county ambassador program.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on that.
Very good.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I voted against this at admin. I thought we had it all settled the prior month. That's why I was upset with it. Well, I shouldn't really say upset, just, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this always coming before us. As far as the county ambassador program, I've heard from Sue, who has done it before, and I see the value to it. I'm not gonna support it, and I'll explain why. I see the value of it. I think it's something we should get into. But we are, first off, there's nothing in here in writing that it's gonna be limited. Nothing in here that says it's gonna be changed every year with different supervisors getting an opportunity to partake in this, which it should have here. And to set, when the supervisor goes out, yes, they're lobbying for what the WCA has decided is a worthwhile issue. I'm not debating that it's not. But that individual, as far as I'm looking at it, is then working for the WCA. And if they're gonna work for the WCA, they get paid by the WCA. We had this conversation at LCC some months ago. That was brought up by one of the supervisors. And it's not just an LCC, other committees belong to regional or state groups also. And it was discussed that if you go to the state, after going to the regional group, from that regional group to go to the state and discuss an issue, you're no longer working for Door County. You're working for that regional group, representing that regional group. And you should be paid by them, which I argued for at our regional LCC meeting. And I couldn't sell it. The others just saw all kinds of headaches with the accounting of it. But as you go to this, you're working for the WCA. If they want to have legislators come, then they should be paid by the WCA. If not, then we shouldn't create a super class of supervisor that has no limitation on what they get paid. If the WCA says we're going every week all year long, it's in here that they can go. They can make thousands and thousands of dollars working for the WCA on our dime. So we don't have any regulation here. We don't have anything that says it's going to be open to everybody. It's going to be on a rotational basis. That needs to be in here in writing before it should pass. And you're setting up a special class of supervisor. We're trying to get a handle on the cost. And now you're presenting a case where you're going to create a super class of supervisor. So that being said, those are my reasons I won't support it. I think it's a great idea, but until we have some kind of control or restrictions on it, I'm not going to vote for it.
Okay, that's fine. I have a response to that, however. It doesn't create a special superclass of supervisors. The county of Door has agreed with Wisconsin County Association at the annual business meeting that these are the items that all counties want to lobby the state for. And as part of that lobbying effort, they've created a program to get local supervisors directly involved with the legislators to build better relationships and to proactively lobby for their own individual causes. Not just what WCA wants, it's what the county has agreed to do with the WCA. Second to that is you also allow local participation. In Susan's case, where Joe put a group of people together on particular items to go down and lobby the legislatures. It doesn't create a super class of supervisors in any way, shape, or form. As far as putting together the intricacies of how it works, the conversation we had at admin committee with Grant was it would be done prior to the next setup of committees and rules of order when we do the reorganization after the next election. This is to get us through to the next election. At the next election cycle, the committee would put together with all of the structure that would need to be done and determine who and how would apply and how it's approved and how many. This is just simply getting us to that next reorganizational meeting.
I understand what you're saying. I think this is a case where we are going to have to respectfully disagree.
That's fine.
I still contend it is, that I'm right, that you're separating out however many supervisors that can go above and beyond what we are deciding is the maximum pay. And I don't know, maybe Grant has a different opinion on that, but if it concerns pay of the supervisor, that has to be decided now rather than wait till April's election to set any standards up, because it involves pay. So until that's in this, that it's stipulated, and I'd vote for it if those stipulations were in here in writing right now. But until those are in there, I won't support it.
Laura?
Okay, just like, and if our county clerk could check that, I thought when you did ask for a motion on this already once before, and I thought it was Lundahl made the motion and then second by Nissa for this vote that I thought that had already happened.
We had a motion and a second for the overall, then we split it into two.
I thought it was the split.
So we need a second, we will need a motion for the second.
It was literally just to split it.
Oh, okay, just a split. Okay, gotcha. And now we're doing it again. Okay, so thank you. And then I would just also to comment that I did attend a fall WCA, the annual business conference. I would encourage other county supervisors to do that and to see it, because it is the chairman of all the counties that are there and voting on those resolutions as a whole. So all the resolutions go down there, go down to WCA. They bring forth which ones they vote on them. One from the county had brought up with the one of our county resolutions was voted on also, and you had made comments on that. So, and that's where that ambassador program is going for. So it's the county chair's representatives deciding with WCA on what's going forward. And I just want to clarify that. It's not certain people from WCA deciding on what's going forward. I think that definitely needed to be clarified, so.
Dan?
Is there any ambassador program coming up to go to between now and April?
It's happening right now today.
Yeah, one today, we're not at because this.
I would imagine there would be one in the spring before April, but I don't know that for sure.
April's the spring, is that going to be pre-April or after April?
That's why I just said, I don't know if it would be before that or not.
See, that's what I'm saying is that.
So, that's what I was saying, this simply covers it until the April reorganization.
Correct. See, and I think, like we mentioned at admin, that the ambassador program should come under the legislative committee, and the legislative committee can make rules up to say, not the same members go, alternate those members, and let the legislative committee come up with rules and regulations of who can go and when, and et cetera.
David?
Help me remind me on the schedule of when this takes in effect. This is a rule regulation we're looking at that in November's meeting, unless we have a special meeting, is the last date that we can actually make changes to our compensation because of the election cycle.
Prior to December 1st.
But this doesn't take in effect until the first April meeting, correct?
Until April 21st, 2020, when the supervisors take office for their next term. It just has to be established by the annual meeting or December, what is it, first, yeah.
So all I want to say is that any decision we make here today does not affect anything until the first meeting in April.
Correct.
So this only goes into effect at that point in
Gets us
time.
to April, right.
Correct.
Well, it doesn't even get us to April because it's not valid until April.
To just add to the clarification of what that platform comes from, it's a WCA platform. It comes originally from each legislative committee in every county. They have the opportunity to look at the resolutions they've passed and pick the ones they want to send to WCA. And then they put them all together in a great big book, and there is a committee that meets in August that reviews them and makes recommendations to that business meeting that is made up of the county board chair. And the recommendations are things like table it or research it more or recommend it for adoption. And then the chairs of the committees or their designee decide on which one. So all of it comes from the individual counties and their legislative committees. So it is their organization to represent what we think ought to go forward.
And if I may, I think it's worth noting whether there's an ambassador program at all and what it looks like is up to the discretion of the county board. So we still maintain control over it.
Biz?
Yeah, the only comment I want to make is the WCA is a handful of officials. And these resolutions or rules and laws come out, and they ask all 72 counties for participation in deciding what to do. This has been going on for years and years and years, and Door County didn't participate, that I know of, anyone going to stuff, because they thought, well, I'm not going to drive down to Madison, probably have to stay overnight, and I don't get any compensation. So there was always like, oh, no, you can't do any of this extra stuff. So I'm in favor of it. You're not working for the WCA. The WCA is asking counties to participate in making the right decision. Not the WCA is only a handful of officials, on Mark and a few people, to make the decision. They want supervisors from all 72 counties to make the decisions.
Linda?
I can just see further confusion next month if somebody brings a motion for a flat salary of $7,500. Are they also going to include in that motion that the county ambassador program is exempt from the $7,500 cap?
A salary would change everything. It would change everything we're talking about for other committees. So. Like I said, it's never going to end. You can only take incremental pieces as they come.
That's what's unfortunate.
Yay.
Benny?
Thank you,
I
Mr.
say
Chairman.
just in, I'm sorry, did you say me? Okay. I say just in general, I think it's important for the county board to think about and decide how they want to see participation with the state legislator and how that can benefit things that we're trying to do as a county. And if you value that, then we put dollars towards it to have people be able to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Depending on how you voted last time, not everybody in this room could make that vote. And I don't know if you were a yes vote to go with that, you can't bring it up again. You'd have to have been maybe a no vote. And I don't know how many, I don't know what the vote was, the yeses and the nos, but not everybody can even bring that up.
That's not, well, okay, let's just clarify this so that way we can kind of.
Yes, that is true. Only the ones that voted nay in September's meeting on the pay can bring it back up for reconsideration.
No,
that's not
you're
true.
wrong.
Grant, you want to step in?
Yeah, we're beyond the period.
We're beyond reconsideration point.
Beyond the period of allowable reconsider the prior resolution. That's why this was advanced as a brand new resolution. So.
He's talking about the compensation at annual meeting.
So just to help us maybe move forward, so here's what we will do based off what we're reading from the room. So if we can get this one part through, what you will see at our annual meeting, November 12th, we'll do the budget, but as part of the thing, you will see the rules written up with this $2,000 clause as part of the base framework for our rules. That will be option one. Option two, based off the feedback, is we will have a draft of a salary version that would reflect the same thing except a salary. That would be an option for you to consider at the next meeting. We will have those available, but that's what we will have because that's what we understand is what's going on. But again, for right now, for today, all we're trying to do is to get this part passed so that way we have a draft of option one, which would be our standard per diem payment that you are familiar with, along with this new limitation in terms of the travel policy limited to 2,000, option one. Option two would be the jettison of that of saying we're going to go to the salary, some of the same framework in terms of trying to have that limit in there as well. So we'll have both of those ready, but for right now, for today, we just need to get through the ambassador program to see if that part could be exempt. But again, we need to get, I think the best thing to do is to get to the annual meeting, and then that way we can flush out the final version, which has to be done then before December 1st.
Linda?
To Mr. Fisher's credit, I do agree with the point that right now there are no parameters set for the county ambassador program. And so be it. If there are parameters set in April, fine and dandy, but it is very vague. So at this point, I'm not going to support that.
So just so
That way.
everybody's aware, the county ambassador program is only 2 or 3 times a year. It's not a monthly thing, it's not where you go down 14 times a year. It's 2 or 3 times a year, period. So. David?
Continue through this. Many of the things Supervisor Fisher said, I agree with. Some of them I do not. I still see this as being a portion of another committee. It is not part of a conference, convention, institute, school, seminar, training, or workshop. So for it to be labeled here in the first place, I don't believe it belongs there. None of this takes effect until the April meeting, and at which time it could change even then to some degree. In my opinion, I would have preferred to see a motion to remove it, strike it from this set in the first place, since it doesn't belong there in the first place, to me now, or in April when it actually gets created and redistributed. That would have been my view of looking at it, because otherwise we are going into April with complete unknowns, no dollar values. Today it's 2 or 3 times a year. It could become once a month. It was created because of the lack of legislatures wanting to listen to the county board. This is an opportunity to get individuals throughout the state to go to these different items and get better understood from the legislature's level. And for me, as it stands now, I'm also going to vote no. And it has nothing to do with the nature of the service. I agree with it, but it is too vague. It is unnecessary, in my opinion, to even be listed here in the first place.
I guess I'm the one who maybe caused this great consternation. I was simply trying to say that the county ambassador program should be separate and part of a committee function instead of being incorporated under fees, conferences, and hotels.
And I agree.
Simple as that, not trying to make it any worse than that, just that simple thing.
Can I clarify one thing?
And where did it even get included as part of this subsection of
Because a county ambassador currently under this program would have to comply with the $1,200. So if she went down to the county ambassador program, it'd have to come under the $1,200.
And based on my previous question and asking of that, you didn't prove to me that it does.
Again, that's why I think is I don't want to get into the weeds in that, but again, I think your interpretation is not what we would traditionally do as the interpretation. So you're saying if it's part of the committee, then they should just go and it's as part of the exemption anyways. I guess I see what you're saying in that, but I don't see that because we're not sending the entire committee, so it's not a full committee function. So that's why David had brought it up, because we're not sending 5 or 7 people down. We're going to limit it to 2 or 3. And it's a special function that goes through WCA. So it's not a standard function. We're not going to notice it as a committee meeting of those individuals going there. So I understand what you're saying is that if we change the rules in our April thing to say that it's part of that committee function, then yes. But the way we operate right now, it is not part of the committee function. So we got special, when we have something that's outside of committee function, the county board chair authorizes those individuals to go. With that understanding, that's why we're looking for the exception, because we don't want to, it's not part of the standard thing of the committee.
Currently in place is the $1,200.
But in my issue, none of this even takes in effect until April 21st in the first place. It doesn't affect anything that's going on right now.
But it's being defined as part of the compensation of someone taking out papers on December 1st.
Right.
So we're discussing it now. It'll be discussed as part of our November 12th meeting, so that when it's clearly, so when someone takes out papers, they know what their compensation is in terms of what they're getting reimbursed for. And what we're saying in terms of their compensation is that the ambassador program would not be included as part of that compensation package. So we have, yes, I agree. It's going to until April.
2 years ago, when I took out my papers, was it published anywhere that I could prove that this was considered part of the per diem system? No.
It didn't exist
why are
2
we
years
making
ago. It just started this last year.
No, Susie's been doing it for years.
For 3 terms.
We're wasting a lot of time on something that, in my mind, we just don't need to deal with.
But David, I guess my biggest thing right now, if we can get it clarified and if we don't have to debate whether your interpretation includes it or doesn't include it, then why not clarify it? Because now we're debating whether or not to clarify something that right now we have disagreement on, just between you and I. So if we have it down on paper saying we clarify it this way, why would we not do that? Because now we're not debating it anymore. Now we're debating a debate on whether or not it's included. Let's just clarify it in words.
It's created a debate that, in my mind, most of the people in this room didn't think it needed to exist.
Why do you keep bringing it up?
David?
Agree with that.
I think that there perhaps is consensus to approve this in some ways, but there's also questions. So why don't we just refer it back to the administrative committee and bring back the details of it for the November meeting? If we endorse this idea of approving it with the details coming forward next month
Can't.
for final approval.
The administrative committee meeting is after county board, I think.
Well,
The
you
administrative committee is after county board.
do a special
do that
meeting before
special
county
meeting.
board. Let's get it done.
Let's get it done right now.
But we don't have the details here, is what some members are asking.
So we don't, there's two parts that we're actually discussing at the same time. One is what our future committees and makeup will be, which would be actually defined as part of the process moving forward for April. So for example, if we would do this, David would now know that we're going to have a committee set up on legislative along with a subset for example for the ambassador program. Likewise, at admin, we talked about the county board fair, for example. We'll have a subset of appointments for that as well. But those are committee appointments, and that'll be part of our change in the rules of our duties as committees. So we could try to make all those changes, but usually we do that at the April meeting when we do all the committee assignments. This is really related to the compensation as it relates to people taking on papers. I mean, we could do that, but we'd have to defer the grant. I mean, we could do a special meeting and try to get all those committees and everything organized before the 12th, but I'll be honest, we'll be scrambling a little bit.
Yeah, I think what we've done traditionally with compensation is we take a snapshot in time. This is what the organization looks like now. We have the reorganization meeting in April concurrent with the election, and the county board that would be situated then would have the ability to make whatever changes they wanted. What we're saying in this resolution, if we assume for the sake of argument that the organization stays the same, the intent is to exempt the county ambassador program from the $2,000 limitation with respect to this chapter 5. If in April the consensus is that the county ambassador program would be enveloped by the legislative committee, then this exemption wouldn't matter because it would fall under a completely different section of the compensation that we're setting up and would be considered part and parcel of a committee meeting versus something else. But right now, today, what we're dealing with is the organization as it exists. And typically, we've made the organizational changes concurrent with the election in April at the reorganization meeting. So I think they're kind of two different questions.
John?
Still trying to grasp it all, but I guess my questions to this would be, can we define today that we either agree that there should be an ambassador program as number one, number two, define the number of people that are allowed to attend, and my third one would be give the legislative committee chairperson the authority to assign anybody that needs to go to the ambassador program for, let's say, January, March, June, or whatever. They can select a member from the legislative committee, or 2 members, or 3 members, however we decide, that could go at that particular time.
It's not on the agenda. It could be something we could place on a future agenda, but I don't think the public has notice of that, so I would be leery of us making that decision today.
Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a motion and a second on the floor to adopt this right now?
Yeah.
I move that I call for the question, and simply because the administrator had a very good idea to outline 2 options at our November 12th meeting, and then we can have this discussion and decide what to do.
One comment.
He moved for the question.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Never
He
mind.
called for the question.
Okay, so we have,
No, not necessarily. If the majority of the board doesn't agree with,
I asked to call for the question.
right, right, but just because you ask for it doesn't mean,
You got to vote on the call.
you gotta
Anybody can do
vote
that
on it.
anytime.
The rest of the board can decide whether or not to proceed to vote on the question or to continue debate.
How do I do that?
okay. So on a voice vote, all in favor of calling the question? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah. Now you can
I didn't.
So now we're going to go to the voter board.
Yep. Okay, we got
We might as well end it, because it's not going to be decided today.
It's still part of the survey.
I don't know exactly how, like, there's so much going on. Could it just be amended that no more than 3 people, no more than 3 trips?
We're all set, we need a 2/3 voting.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, my gosh.
Whoops, one more time.
That's passed on a vote of 15 yes, 6 no, 0 absent.
Another $25.
I
guess. And
Who's that?
it's not even a person, it's one of those robocalls.
Those should be.
You want me to quit yelling you, Helen?
That should be double.
Always turn it.
Yep.
Okay, next. Resolution 2019-71, alternative work schedules.
He's already moved on.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll just take just 2 minutes to explain it. It's actually something.
Sure.
It depends, but it's actually something I think it's long overdue. I'm actually very excited to bring this one forward. It's something that's been discussed back and forth. But again, our main idea is that we're trying to become a more flexible organization in terms of working with our employees, but also recognizing the fact that we're also viewed as a local unit of government, and we're trying to balance that thing of the perception of what we're doing as an organization. So really what's before you is, you can see on page 15 of your packet is what's being proposed. And again, it's just called an alternative work schedule. And really what's being included in there is, I guess, 3 options where an employee, it would, one thing that we discussed at admin, I just want to clarify, it's not something that someone could just change their schedule day to day, week to week. What we're actually looking for a person to do, they'd actually fill out paperwork and say, I'm going to, for the next, we're looking at a 3-month window, for the next 3 months, this is going to be my set schedule week to week. So it's not something that's going to be all over the map. The second main item is that we will maintain our business operations standard as we do now. In other words, from 8 to 4:30 is our standard operations. We will continue to do such. And the departments are responsible for keeping their offices open during those office hours. And the third one is we did clarify is that obviously we have smaller departments or certain areas where it does not qualify for certain individuals, for employees. But that does not mean that we should not make it available as a opportunity for other employees within the organization. That being said, again, if you go to page 15, there's, in essence, we're looking for this, the option for an employee to, again, do an alternative work schedule, and there's 3 ways that we've kind of identified it. One's called a flexible daily schedule, and that's something where they can actually define their schedule and submit that and say, this is what I'm working each week within hours and time frame. The next one is the 4-10 schedule. We had this discussion at admin. Again, this would be like just 4 10-hour days with a day off. It does not mean you get every Friday off or every Monday off. It depends on what the department needs in terms of their operations. But again, we did limit it to 10 hours because just our viewpoint right now is that if you start having employees work more than 10 hours, we start to lose effectiveness. Again, some people can say they can do that, but for right now, our first time out of the gate, we would like to limit it to a 10-hour window in terms of maximum hours in the day. And then the last one is this called a 980 schedule. Again, it's based off their 2-week pay period in terms of how they would do that. But again, they could flex their hours within that window as well. I guess one thing that also to clarify is we did limit, I guess, what we're considering the times of when they can flex their schedules. Again, in most cases, we're looking at a window between 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. in terms of our operations. This is the last question that came up in terms of discussion. Again, when we do the flexing, we're not looking to, in essence, enhance our costs as an organization, so we're not going to be, I guess, operating the building longer or shorter. We feel that, I mean, the conditions in the building should be fine for those employees to work those extended hours, so we're not going to extend the hours of our operations as far as HVAC, that type of thing. So, but I think it's just one of those things, again, it's something that has been requested for a long time. I know one thing that did come up at admin is, you know, should we have gone further and do the work at home policy? I think right now, just in talking and doing our research, we think this is a good first step for providing some opportunities for our employees, and we'll continue to do research at work from home But I think as an organization, we're not quite there yet to fully define that, because we did a lot of research on that, and there is, although it sounds really basic, there's a lot of legal requirements that, in speaking with Aegis, there's a lot of things that we should be looking at in terms of if you're actually going to have people work from home that we need to look at as an organization. So that's why I guess the work from home policy is not included as this amendment right now. I don't know, Grant, did I miss anything?
No, just if this is adopted to compel us to take a look at it again next year, we put a sunset provision where this sunsets at the end of 2020. It's not that we want to kill it, we just want to see what it looks like and compel us to take a look at it this time, probably next year.
Correct.
Questions? Dave?
This applies to the elected officials as well, right? Giving them the flexibility to be able to maneuver. You know, some of them would want to work at home right now, but.
And they could.
They could.
They didn't have to show.
They don't even have to show up.
Well, that's true. They don't have any regulations.
They don't have any.
I forgot. It's all right.
They're elected officials.
Sorry for wasting more time.
This takes effect when? This would take effect when?
We're looking at implementation starting in December.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make the comment that this is extremely innovative of us, and a lot of my master's work was in this area for workplace wellness. So it actually does increase the wellness of our employees and the attractiveness of these jobs. So I was really excited to see this. There is a lot of really fantastic data, tons of good workplace studies that show that this does actually create a more motivated, more effective employee as well. So we will be getting more bang for our buck in this structure, in theory. So.
Would it be up to the department heads to implement these?
Sure, in terms of a process,
Fairness-wise,
yep,
yeah.
so in terms of the process, it'll be up to the department head to make sure their operations, I guess, are handled by the flexing of the hours. But we will have the employee, in essence, fill out paperwork for it, and it'll be submitted to the department head, they sign off, and then also be signed off by our HR director. Because what we want to do is make sure we track it within our system and also within our payroll, so that way we know.
And for any department heads that want to request, the request goes directly to the county administrator.
Correct.
Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was going to ask if this includes the highway department, because traditionally, over many years, they go to their 410s, and it's a money saver for the county to fire up the hot mix plant, you know, that earlier and have work a 10-hour day. I mean, the county comes out better, and the employees like it. So, and then that last sentence about no more than a 40-hour week, well, we know that, like the paving crew, if trucks are showing up and they're going to have their 40 hours in, they can't go to throw it away. They're going to lay it down. So they're authorized to go ahead and finish the job. And so that's why I said it.
Correct. Well, I guess what we're saying is we're not allowing the policy to automatically build in overtime for our regular employees. We do understand, like with the highway operations and stuff like that, this is the way they operate as an enterprise. That's part of their business function.
That's right.
But what we're trying to say is that with this policy for our regular, I guess what we consider our standard employees, we're not going to allow a schedule that actually has built-in overtime.
Thank you.
As an approved policy.
And I suppose it should be stated, although it's clearly understood, that the employees that are subject to a collective bargaining agreement, this would be something would actually have to be bargained, so.
Anybody else? That will go to the voter board. John?
You have to hit yes or no first.
I did. Had to retrain you.
Fast vote, 21 yes, 0 no.
Battery recharge.
Thank you.
Operator error.
Ordinances, 2019-12, amendment of Chapter 12, Door County Code. Mr. Offset.
Also moved.
I'll second that.
And we'll have Ben come forward since he's been sitting back there so patiently, and he can explain it. Coming to the head. Long speech.
Then nobody has to crank their neck around.
Good morning.
Good morning. So this amendment is in response, so a couple months ago, we had proposed to the Facilities and Parks Committee collecting a fee for storage of ice shanties within our parks. So traditionally what's happened in the past is ice fishermen use our boat launches to access the ice, but they've been storing their ice shanties in our boat launch parks, more or less. And what is occurring is we're getting too many ice shanties in a lot of our parks. They're damaging the lawn. We have to plow around them and things like this. So this is just a way of recouping some of that expense. Once we agreed upon that fee structure, then we, in consultation with Grant, thought it would be best to update Chapter 12 of the county code to reflect that there is an ice shanty provision there. So what you see here before you on page 19 is the draft language for that to be added to the code. I don't know if there's any questions or not. It seems pretty straightforward. Just so everybody is aware, at the state parks, they have a law or a state statute that regulates against all ice shanties being stored in their park. So I think, and they chose to just start enforcing that law a couple of years ago, so I think that has increased the amount of shanties that have shown up at our parks.
Just a stupid timing question. Back when I used to ice fish, I thought ice shanties had to be removed from the bay, the physical water, by March 12th.
Correct.
And you have it off the park by March 1st. So, I mean, they can technically be fishing on and off onto the bay up until the 12th without any question. Why March 1st?
We just selected March 1st because it was around that same point in time. And then also, in the past few years, we've had some people that will pull their ice shanty off in March and leave it in our park, and our parks crew is going back a month later, removing it.
And that I agree with. Yeah, okay.
John?
So during the fishing season, ice fishing season, I could pull my shanty off, put it in the park, and then take it out the next day. That's not illegal, is it?
Basically, what this fee is to allow people to do that. So what it is it's a fee, and there's a sticker.
After the fishing season is closed and the shanties are supposed to be off of the ice, then I have to remove it. And if I don't remove it, bingo.
Correct.
Thank you.
Except that to my question, I think the bay is the 12th.
Yeah, well, there's,
So that's all.
just that I can pull it out there for one day and let it go back the next day during the season.
Right.
That's not storage.
No, that
It's stored
would be
overnight.
storage,
It
yes.
storage.
Mhm.
If it's there overnight, it's stored.
So, and to be clear, this is for storage of the shanty on the park property. This is not a launching fee, like to launch your boat or things like that. So if people brought their shanty, unloaded it in the parking lot, took it on the ice, and then at the end of the day took it back home with them, there would be no fee at all. This is just for the storage of it on park property.
Yeah, so basically the temporary storage between trips out onto the ice during the ice fishing season.
Correct.
So the permit, you're buying a season-long permit.
Oh, my
Parking lot.
Parking lot permit. That's the point. Linda?
So people can store their ice shanty on a park property, and it sounds like a lot of people are doing that. Do you get any complaints from the neighboring property owners that they don't like all these ice shanties next door?
We really haven't received a lot of that. However, last year at Carmody Park in particular, they were starting to push them up onto the grass, and there was concern that they'd eventually cross off of our property. We had some turf damage and things like that. So we don't have any formal neighbor complaints at this point.
If there were complaints, would you address that and potentially say, okay, we're not going to allow storage of ice shanties anymore?
Yeah, what this will enable us to do is kind of set a predetermined number that each park can accommodate. I know last winter At Penny Park, for example, we had some commercial vendors that would leave half a dozen shanties in the parking lot. So, you know, the space can get limited very quickly depending on the size of the launch and the area that we have to accommodate it.
Yeah, having Shudware's Dock and Sugar Creek as well as Carmody down in Southern Door, those are really popular ice fishing places. I can see a lot of resistance coming from the fishermen who have traditionally pulled their shanties back close to shore, leaving them on the ice or sometimes into the docking area or shore. Couldn't this be handled somewhat with regulation on where they're being placed, if they're in your way or whatever it is, without the fees? Because we're going to have an uprise down there.
I suppose that would be possible, you know, but again, we don't have anything in our code right now that regulates that, so it's kind of been a free-for-all in the past, and now with the state parks regulating it, we have that higher usership. So we selected to go with a fee to try and have some more regulation on who we're authorizing and controlling the numbers and things like that. Because if we just say a flat number of, well, we'll accommodate 25, for example, we'd still probably go through the effort of having to authorize some kind of permit or things like that. So it's our administrative time and effort and energy to go into it. So if we're going to invest the time and energy to manage people's usage, you know, I guess we approached it from the standpoint it's no different than collecting that administrative fee.
But if you're trying to regulate the number, you still have to have a designated area for these shanties to be at.
Correct.
Joel? So the way I read this is it's kind of equal to having a launching fee for the summertime with a boat at a county park. Except now we're charging somebody $35 to be able to bring their shanty in through the winter months, January, February, March, whatever it might be. If they want to take it off the ice for the night, they can bring it up and set it in the parking lot and take it back out again. It's an unlimited back and forth for $35 a season.
Correct.
So it's kind of equivalent to a launching fee at a county park for a boat.
They'll take them back to shore.
John?
You keep using the word state. I guess our concern is county parks. You keep using the word state parks.
Right, and the reference to the state parks is that they no longer allow any shanties to be stored on state property. So at like Potawatomi, they don't allow shanty storage at all. And I suppose that's another option that we could consider, but I guess we were trying to still accommodate and recognize the desire for ice fishermen to utilize our launches in the winter months. So this is kind of an in-between solution.
Biz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben, I think David's right. Probably a loophole here for a fisherman to save the $35. He's going to bring his shack in and park it where we normally have our docks, which you aren't going to have control over. If they leave it there instead of the parking lot, they aren't going to pay the $35 fee. And I can see people wanting to save $35 doing that. So, and maybe you can't control that because they're actually on the water yet, right where the docks are.
Correct.
And they're not on shore in the park, they're still on the water, and they aren't going to pay the $35 fee.
Right, and I guess we anticipate that there are going to be people that try to do that. What we can regulate is they cannot impede the launch itself, and that would be enforced by the DNR wardens. They can't prohibit other people's access to the ice by leaving their shanties in the way. So yes, we may get some that store on the ice, and then when they're on the ice, then that's a DNR enforcement.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the intention is for a $35 fee per shanty?
Correct.
Okay, I just, under number 2 there, it does say any person intending to locate, place, or store a portable fishing shelter, but then on that subpart B there, maybe you should say per shelter. I don't know if that's going to be that critical or not. But then I also wonder about, you mentioned these commercial vendors who have multiple shanties. Have we considered at all a higher fee for people who are making for-profit, use of our parking lot?
And I don't know, maybe Grant can answer this a little bit better. We had originally kind of had that conversation about a separate commercial fee versus a private fee. And if I remember correctly, we don't have the ability to do that, or just
And right now, we don't allow technically commercial activities in our parks, and at least from my standpoint, Ken and I have talked about it, and Ben, we're not really excited about that prospect, and it would take a bit of research and some additional regulations. I think once you open that door, are you gonna have food trucks, or you're gonna have, you name it, because you can't just open it a crack. So we're just trying to set a fee and recoup our administrative cost at $35 per an entire season. We're not getting rich over it. And
Right.
if people want to pay for 6 shelters, whether they're a commercial operation or they have 6 family members that all enjoy ice fishing, that's how we're going to deal with it for now.
Thank you.
Megan?
2 questions. So I had the same thought and concern that Bob just brought up. Is it then first come, first serve? Or will we be limiting the number of commercial shacks that can use that space if we have limited space? That's the first question. And then my second question would be, what are neighboring counties doing in their parks?
So your first question is, I guess initially it would be a first come, first serve, and we would make a determination of how many shanties that we would allow per park. If we started to, I guess what I would propose, if we started to see that there was greater demand than available slots, we would either do a designated application period, or we would do some type of a lottery system to award those spaces to the permits. In terms of what other counties are doing, right now I'm not aware that any other county does this. I know there are counties that prohibit the storage of shelters in their parks entirely. I think the probably closest example of this is in Madison. There is a fee structure, and then theirs is actually a launching structure. So everybody that launches a shanty from one of their launches pays a fee. We aren't proposing it as a launching, it's the storage portion of that. And I think part of that is governed also by state statute, that we can't charge a launching fee for an ice shanty or an access fee in that realm.
John?
Yeah, I guess I would oppose the fee itself. I'm not opposed to the time limit as far as removing them from the parks. And if it's a storage area, not big enough to house 100 shanties, then we should designate what is the storage area and first come, first serve. But I don't see the need to increase a fee, especially to our users from within the county that already pay taxes for the county parks and everything else. I don't see where we've come up with a cost of damages from anybody on our park systems, or I haven't heard anything on that. I'm not saying there isn't any, but I think we can achieve the same thing by limiting the spaces or designating spaces where they can park them. First come, first serve, and we can set a date that they have to be out of the park. March 1st is fine by me if that's what it takes to do it. But I don't see that we need to charge them a parking fee or user fee for storage.
Well, and if I can, part of the reason that we're collecting the fee is some of these launches and things are areas that we previously were not snow plowing in the winter months. So now we are dedicating staff, vehicles, fuel, et cetera, to maintaining and keeping bathrooms open and serviced and things like that, where in the past we hadn't. So this is just part of why we're charging that fee.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the things that I just wanted to state up front. I mean, it's really important because we are, again, we're doing it internal, but we're actually getting charged by highway for a lot of the plowing for this. So there's an additional fee that we've taken on. So I think it is a direct service that we're providing in terms of enhancement. I mean, we could say, hey, we're not going to plow and keep these bathrooms open because we're spending extra money to do all this. So I think the fee that we're charging is very, very minimal, but we're also providing, I guess, a valuable service that helps out all those areas. So I I don't think it's overly burdensome for what we're proposing.
And one other point that I should make is it's a flat $35 fee. We haven't segregated a difference between a resident or non-resident fee like we do for boat launch. And part of that is just because the tourism drops off a little bit in the winter months up here, so we didn't really want to create that added burden, and it keeps it simple on our end for administrative purposes.
Can I park my car in a county park overnight?
You would need to get special authorization from the department.
Would I have to pay a fee for that?
For parking overnight?
Yeah.
Under our current structure, no. However, with our new fee structure moving forward, there is an application for a special use fee for that.
Yeah, I'm suspecting that if we had that during the other seasons, right, the warmer seasons, if there's a bunch of cars starting to go into the parking lots and the parks and staying there overnight, occupied or unoccupied, I'm guessing this similar situation would come up. So that's kind of the way I'm approaching looking at it. And also I would agree with B2B, that it does specify that it's per ice fishing shelter permit, that it's specified per. And I'm not sure if one group of people come in there with one permit with 3 shanties, there should be a permit for each shanty.
David?
And as a reminder, if I remember correctly, even the lowest service capable municipal boat ramp has a fee, right?
Pretty much all of them do.
So basically, it's a fee because it's municipal controlled access to the bay or lake, and this is what they're using it for, just a different purpose. So we still charge even the lowest level one that may not have a bathroom, may not have anything, a fee for that use. So why wouldn't you charge at least a 35 for seasonal ice fishing?
Right, but we typically it's not an access.
No, I'm just saying that
okay.
what I'm saying is that immaterial of the bathrooms, the plowing and that stuff, somebody that uses the lowest level dock ramp to drop a boat in the water, we still have a fee for them to use that. So why wouldn't we expect them, for other people in a different way of using that same ramp, some kind of a fee for the administrative aspect of it?
Correct.
Vinnie?
I think we should support this because it creates more work, and you're actually damaging, if grass is damaged or concrete is damaged with moving them around. And it's also, going to a park and you see multiple structures stored there, you don't see that with any other activity. Someone can't leave their kayak there for 5 months of the summer, so they can just easily launch it, to go kayaking in the summer. So to be able to leave your ice shanty there, I think is a nice thing that we're allowing people to do, but I think it's fair to charge a price for it because it's beyond a normal use of a county park, of just typical normal use. If you're keeping something you own there for, the whole winter season, that's a lot.
Right, and I approach this too as, with our county, we have 300 miles of shoreline here within the county, so it would only be natural that our county be the leader in kind of establishing this kind of structure. So that's why it's not a common thing other places, because other places don't have the access to water like our county does.
John?
Do we plow Cave Point Park in the wintertime?
Yes, the highway department goes
For
through.
what purpose of that?
For access to the park.
For access to the park. But yet we want to charge ice fishermen a fee because they want to park their shanties in the park down south? We plow the parks in, other areas of the county, we don't charge a fee for those services. We eat those costs as a county. I'm opposed to the fee portion of it.
I just go back to the difference being to permanently, or not permanently, to temporarily, more than overnight, even for a whole season, to store your personal property on a county park is asking more than, it's not just the plowing or the bathrooms, it's like, whatever square footage your shanty is, you're removing that use of the park from anybody else who wants to use the park because your personal property is sitting there. So I feel like that is a good reason to have a permit. And it probably would help you to know whose is that. By applying for the permit, then you even know whose shanty that is. If they don't remove it, you can at least call them and say, hey, come get your shanty. I don't know.
Correct.
Okay, to answer that, the owner of the shanty is required to have his name and address on it. That's the rule of the DNR. you know, if you talk about other counties, I'm not aware that Kewaunee County is doing anything. Red River County Park is 3 miles south of the county line. You know, you're going to be putting more burden to them. There's another area that they go off of County N at near, used to be Ernie's.
Yeah.
That's a private area. There's no charge or no fees there. You're going to be putting more pressure on that area, which is already a lot of fishermen there. They're parked up on County N in both directions. It's a curve there. You know, this has been, fishermen have been using these parks forever like this, and I just don't see the need for a fee on this.
Susan?
I guess I just would suggest to remind that I could take my shanty down there, put it on the ice, take it back off and take it home, and I'm not charged for anything.
Correct.
It's if I want to park it there. That's all this is, and I think it's reasonable.
Helen?
I know we're always talking about money and budget, and I think this is, we need to take a look at where we can charge and how we can charge and what we can charge, because I hear a lot of people say, well, we can't, you know, we give all this stuff for nothing. We don't get anything in return. And I think we need to start thinking about what we can charge for and what we can get in return. And if we're going to be keeping bathrooms open, et cetera, I doubt if the $35 and plowing, I doubt if the $35 is really even covering the admin costs and those costs. So we're still losing money on this, but even by having bathrooms open, keeping the parking lots plowed, that is an advantage to people that we have not done in the past.
I will point out also that we do pay a fee to be able to park overnight on the street in the city of Sturgeon Bay. You can do that. You pay a fee to do that. So to me, as I'm going back and forth, I get what David and John are saying, and part of me really agrees with that. But then there is the concept, that overnight parking concept, that and the point that Vinny made. You know, I'm not gonna keep my summer recreation personal property down at the park. Now, if there was a facility available to do that, a locker or some sort that I could pay for, then I would do that. So.
John?
Just one more addition to that. All these fishermen that we have spend money here. They come just like a regular tourist in the summertime. They buy gas, they buy fishing lures, they buy beer, all the groceries that are associated with spending the day out on the ice for, you know, fun activities. And again, I'm opposed to the cost. I'm not opposed to setting areas that they can leave them on, because a lot of the parks don't get used in the wintertime, other than for ice fishing. If it's access to the water for, I don't know how many people ski on the ice, I've never seen anybody, but if they're walking along the shoreline, so be it. We're leaving those accesses open. The storage fee just doesn't sit well, and it's not gonna sit well with the ice fishing, I'll tell you that now. There's no reason that I see right now for a fee to say that we're gonna recoup $1,000 so we can keep the bathroom open or keep it plowed. If we plow all the parks, fine. If we don't, then they're closed for the winter, plain and simple. But I don't see us discriminating on one end of the county or the other, you know, just because I'm an ice fisherman.
Just to clarify, we don't keep all the parks open. We have certain priority parks that we do, and that was set up through the Parks Department in terms of trying to manage our budget in terms of that. And again, from, I think it's been stated, I'll leave it at that. Again, there is a difference between actually storing your property on the park, and that's what we're trying to distinguish. We can plow them, and we're providing that, and we're, in parts of that, we're definitely eating a lot of that cost, but for the ability for someone to store that long-term, and again, whether or not they cause damage to parking lot, in most cases, we feel that they're not, because the ground's usually frozen, but that type of thing, but there is a added benefit, and if you choose, if they want to choose to start on the ice out of the way from the thing, they can do that as well. We're not forcing them. It's a purchased opportunity that should they choose to want to store their thing, they have an opportunity to purchase that. If they don't want to, they can store it on the ice or they can pull it off. It's just an opportunity cost, it's, like we mentioned on a lot of the other things that we do for our county parks, so.
Dave?
Different question. I'm assuming you investigated liability insurance by charging a fee quite often. That implies some ability. I'm assuming there's a sign off on the application.
Yeah, and that would be developed with Grant. I would assume Grant would it be the hold harmless like we do for the hunting program.
Thing that we do.
Standard, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it is worth pointing out, I mean, it does create more of a regulatory burden on the Parks Department. There's more admin cost or whatever, just not admin, but more cost administering it. And I do kind of wonder if we just have a designated area, or maybe somehow if we are able to better define where they park them, kind of no harm, no foul. If that's part of the problem, is we just need to better define where they are. I don't know that we necessarily need a fee. I don't know if the fee is necessary to accomplish that.
I guess one concern that I would have with just designating a parking space is, would we get a vendor that would dump 6 shelters there just to get the space? And then members of the public wouldn't have equal opportunity to that. I mean, we could get, I've experienced that in other environments. So by having the fee structure and some type of application to that, that gives us the ability to regulate that and create equal opportunity for people.
Well, and that's why I go back to, maybe we should be charging the people who are making money on this effort, not the general public. The general fisherman or fisherwoman maybe shouldn't have to pay the fee, but maybe the people who are actually doing this as a business should have to pay the fee. And I realize that maybe gets into some of our legal issues, but that's the way I would prefer to see us charging the people who are making money on this, but not charge the people who are just going out to fish.
Lauren, you have a comment?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't, and again, like as you mentioned too, we don't know if they're a resident or non-resident, right? So I think you can look at that two different ways too. And I can see that there'd be constituents, maybe possibly even making comments to say, I don't want to see any of those boat launches out there. It takes away the natural beauty of the park, and they're piled up there all season. So I mean, we could look at this many different ways. We have a county with the most state parks out of any other counties in the state that I recall, that I know of. So if they made a rule and a reg change and now our county parks are affected by it, I think as a county we should somewhat react. And I think what has been proposed and bringing forth is fair. And I think it's something that we should act on and do. So thank you.
I would just say to that too, to keep in mind, that I'm assuming that since it even has come up, if it doesn't change and we don't have a fee and problems still keep arising, we'll possibly eventually do what the state parks did and just say none at all. So this is, to me, a way of offering the service and continuing to offer the service, but doing it in a way that's more feasible for what's occurring and for the storage that's happening there, which is different than just fishing, because you're keeping your property there again. You're not just, I just don't want it to sound like we're saying we're charging a fee for people to go ice fishing. It's not that. It's to have kind of what I would assume would be a luxury of keeping your shanty on the shore instead of on the ice if you choose to do that.
Right. A comparable is we charge winter storage for people to store their boats and vehicles and things like that at John Miles Park. So I guess how I approach this is no different than if somebody wanted to put a storage shed in one of our parking lots in the summertime and keep their hiking gear and things in it. Obviously it takes away space from another public user. So this is just a way of recapturing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this going to put a burden on the town parks? Because if they don't have to pay at the town parks, let me tell you, I can't get home half the time.
No.
Yeah, now. But, I mean, I would think that's going to put a burden on all the town parks, too.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of danced around it a little bit, with Kewaunee County and other areas, is by going forward with this structure, it will probably force some communities to evaluate how they want to handle it at their facilities. And I think it's just been this kind of unwritten thing that's just existed for years. And, like I said before, this is our opportunity to kind of be the leader in showing what that might look like. It would be very easy for example, the city of Sturgeon Bay to implement a similar policy. And then it just, everybody's accustomed to paying a daily launch fee at a boat launch now. It's just an expectation. And that that arose out of somebody deciding, hey, we should be charging a fee for this type of thing. So I guess, to answer your question, yes, this could potentially cause some townships or counties to have to evaluate what their policy is on it. But to me, I think it's a conversation that's worthy of happening.
So then a different scenario, those individuals that normally leave their ice shanty on the bay, February 25th comes along, ice is getting soft, northwest wind's gonna come up, and then normally would pull the ice shanty up onto the boat launch. It might be there a week. That's not intended to affect them. They're not gonna be a concern, right?
Oh, if they
Well,
store overnight, they should have.
If it's going to be there overnight, then they would be subject to this policy and this fee.
So I mean, I'm referring to the normal effort at the end of the season of pulling it up off. I've certainly sat in the bar in Egg Harbor and watched that ice undulate up and down, and watching people pulling them off, and they drop them off at the boat launch, because that's where they launched them, and they just didn't bring their trailer to take care of it. So that would affect them.
Correct.
That would be potential. Okay.
Ultimately, what it does is it puts the responsibility of the ice shanty owner on the ice shanty owner to plan with the weather conditions, to have their stuff set up and where they're going to store it. And I guess from my standpoint, I have enough to manage with the parks that I don't need to take on that responsibility for them.
So the person that's taking off due to the change in weather, it's the end of the season anyways, they would be taking it off normally, and they normally would come down with their trailer. What do they do to you? How do they get a hold of you? Can they get a permit? What would they do?
Well, they would ultimately what we'll do is we'll have this application most likely on our website. They can call our parks office. We are going to be installing automated pay stations at several of our launches, and we could update it so that they could purchase the sticker right at the machine in the park if they wanted to.
Okay, so for me, I don't have a problem with the season-wide. I do have a problem with charging the guy in the last couple of days, and it sits there just long enough for him to get his trailer down. That I have a problem with. I understand why you would do it, but I don't agree with that side of it.
Right. I guess, my concern with that is if we would make an exception because it's the last week of the season or things like that, I guess then where's the exception line? I mean, there's got to be a boundary at some level. And if it's straightforward, if it's overnight, that's what it is, then that's what it is. Unless there's a separate per day parking pass, but then that gets very cumbersome from our end to regulate and manage.
Okay, go to the voter board.
It was Dan's idea.
It's passed on a vote of 15 yes, 6 no. Report text amendment to chapter 8.
Good luck getting home, Nancy.
David.
That's when people bring it in.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mariah? I'll defer to Mariah. I'm sorry, the department head for land use services.
Good morning.
I'm going to come up here so Grant can shake his head at me if I say something I'm not supposed to.
Secret code? Indicator signs?
So these amendments would replace the existing chapter that we have in the county comprehensive ordinance that regulates signs. A little bit of backstory. We were well aware that in 2015, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case called Reed versus Gilbert, which dramatically changes how you can regulate signs in this country. In a nutshell, to kind of oversimplify what it says, it more or less says that if you have to read the sign in order to determine how to regulate it, then there's something wrong with your regulations. So we knew that that court case had happened and that we had provisions in our ordinance that did not meet it. But then we had a challenge earlier this year to other provisions in the ordinance, and it was the opinion of the outside attorney that Grant consulted with through our insurance company that, in fact, they would probably throw out our entire chapter if we got taken to court. So we finished up the work that we had been doing on a new chapter quickly in order to bring this to you. So the Resource Planning Committee talked about this general concept at a couple of different meetings, and then we had the hearing just about 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. We did not send this through the normal review procedure that we do with towns when we do a text amendment. Normally, we give them up to an extra 4 weeks on top of the 3 or so weeks it takes to get scheduled at the Resource Planning Committee level. And the reason that we did not do that is because mostly what we're trying to do, if you attempted to try and read through this, is as best we can match federal and state law and court cases that are out there, but at the same time retain as much as we could of our existing chapter that we had that regulates signs. So the biggest changes are just in kind of wrapping your heads around how we regulate things. We're now mostly concerned with how a sign looks instead of what's on it. So we can't, have a section that's about real estate signs anymore. And we can't have a section that's about temporary development signs, and we can't have a section about, nameplates or things like that. So we tried to go through and make it as logical as we could and as understandable as we could, but again, to kind of retain what we liked about the old chapter. So that's the background. I don't know if there's anything in particular you want to talk about with regard to any of the regulations themselves. It's much more detailed than our existing ordinance is or existing chapter is in terms of the types of things that are prohibited. We had a couple of relatively vague sections previously that prohibited certain types of signs. We tried to spell those out even more clearly in this, so there's probably some redundancy here. And I'm sure we'll come across things that need to be amended in the future. And there's other court cases swirling around the country which might make us rewrite this in a couple of years anyway.
Linda?
So late yesterday afternoon, I received a call from one of a property owner in the town of Sebastopol. And they had good intentions on repairing their signs, but years ago, certain repairs were not allowed. So they were happy to see that now they can make repairs to their signs. However, they also stressed how difficult it is to find somebody to repair an existing sign. So unless you hook up with one of the large advertisers, and you can imagine who that might be, it's very difficult to find somebody with articulated boom or cherry pickers, what I call it, to get up there and actually do the repairs, and especially when the signs are deteriorating more and more over the years. So as long as they're allowed to make repairs, and they report their progress to you without having a fine of, not being repaired within 1 year, I guess that's, as long as they keep on track and they are making an effort to repair. But like I said, it's very difficult to find sign repairs unless you sign on with a large company.
What Linda's referring to is we used to, if you were what's considered a non-conforming sign, so if you were, too large or in an area where an off-premise sign or something like that wasn't allowed, once your sign fell over or if you needed to replace the actual supports or face, you weren't allowed to do that. Now, because of a new state law that was passed last year where we have to allow essentially the whole replacement of a non-conforming sign over the course of 3 years. This chapter does allow that. We are requiring a permit when someone is going to replace either the support poles or the face of the sign, just so that we know what's going on and we can keep track of, how that sign is being repaired. I think what you're probably talking about is if a sign, well, I guess maybe you're talking about that situation, but as well as if a sign is destroyed. So now if somebody vandalizes it or somebody drives a truck into it or it gets blown over or something like that, you are allowed to replace the entire sign. And I believe what we wrote in here, I can try and find the section, is that you have 12 months to take out the permit, and then that permit is good for a year. So that would give you 2 years after your sign came down for you to be able to replace it.
Okay, that's helpful because I just took it as being, 1 year on the face of it. And then, so it was nice to see the distinguish between customary maintenance and destroyed.
Right, and that you'll notice in the definitions, we quoted the state statutes right and left all over the place, so we were using a lot of their definitions. Anytime we used a phrase that was covered by the state, we used their definitions.
And then also sign owners that say they've had this sign for a number of years, like since 1959, and they didn't realize that, you know, the one-year thing about removing it and whatever. But you said that you have a sign database now where you're tracking all of the signs throughout the county?
Well,
or at least the county zoned municipalities?
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is the section about abandoned or discontinued signs. So we've had something in the ordinance since at least 1995, and possibly prior to that, maybe Mr. Austin remembers. Whereas if your sign is advertising something, even though we're not supposed to use the word advertising anymore, if your sign's talking about something that doesn't exist anymore, you're supposed to take it down within a year. Most people are pretty good about doing that. I know there are a handful in Sebastopol that we've slowly been working on. But yeah, if it's changed to something where there's a message on it that's now allowed, then that's fine. But it is supposed to come down within a year if there's something on there that's not relevant anymore.
And then one more point. On page 32 of our packet, under section 8.08, if you look at the last line of that paragraph, I think there might be a word missing. So it says, or 8.08 parent 2, it says non-conforming signs shall not be allowed any of the following. In any of the following?
Maybe it would have been more clear if we had said shall not be allowed to do any of the following, but you can't, so they're really not allowed any of the following. They're not allowed substantial change or a change that's not considered customary maintenance or replacement of the face or structure with dissimilar materials or to convert from a one-sided to a two-sided.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I miss it? Did we vote to accept the report?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Normally, we have a motion to accept the report in a second.
And then
we vote on that because there's nothing to debate there. We just accept the report. Then we go on with a motion in a second for the amendment, and we are already on page 31 or whatever it was that we didn't. Did we vote on the?
There's a motion on the report which allows you to ask the questions, what's in the report.
I think we've done it both ways. I mean, we're probably not always very consistent. So, sorry if I shouldn't be talking yet.
Since I've been on it, and certainly since I've been chairman, we voted to accept the report and then had a motion to, for the amendment, and then debated what's in it.
Technically correct, yes. There shouldn't be any debate about the report. A hearing was held, and now they've brought something to you.
I would just like to have a motion to accept the report. I'll make a motion to accept the report.
We already have a motion.
Second?
We already have that.
Yeah, okay. But we haven't voted on it.
No, because they're discussing the report.
Okay, I look at it as discussing the amendment.
I think, yeah, because technically the chapter is the attachment to the ordinance, but I think, I don't know that it matters.
I guess so.
Linda?
Well, I have one more question. I don't know if I should ask it now or later. But I think from past practice, you normally waited until we have a motion on the resolution. So, anyway, my question is, and I think we talked about this, electronic LED signs. Once this ordinance takes effect, will no longer be allowed, correct?
They
In
already.
any county zone municipality.
Right.
Except municipalities would be exempt.
And I should have said that right off the bat. This only applies to the 9 towns that are under county comprehensive zoning. This doesn't apply in the 5 towns that have shoreline zoning. We have language right now in our existing Chapter 8 that we have used historically to prevent LED signs, but it wasn't very clear and specific. This specifically says no.
Of any size, nature, whatever.
Correct.
There shall be none.
Right. Yeah, I mean, anything that's out there already would get grandfathered, but for new ones, no.
Okay, on a voice vote to accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 2019-13, text amendments to Chapter 8, signs.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve and pass mandatory zoning ordinance 2019-13. And in the past, we have done it the way we just did it.
I'll second.
that.
Any discussion?
I think we have all over again.
What's the reasoning behind no more LED signs?
Just, we get a lot of complaints about the couple that are out there that aren't in county zoning, and there were several towns that already had overlays that included them anyway. And like I said, we have had language that we had used to interpret it that way historically anyway.
I'm just curious.
Megan?
I'll weigh in on that because I was just mentioning it actually over here. Like, for instance, the log den sign, anybody who's coming past that late at night, it's actually quite
Blinding.
distracting and blinding. So that's an example of an LED, I believe.
And if I may, a response to that, because that particular, I'm a retired town board member, that particular sign went in before the town had ordinances, caused the town ordinance, and has since been removed because it has failed.
Oh, I noticed
And
that.
because it became a non-conforming sign when the ordinance was installed, it couldn't be put back up again.
Linda?
I was just going to mention the town of Egg Harbor is not under county zoning, as
What?
Mr. Anigal just pointed out.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anytime we're talking about signing, or signage, the discussion also includes lighting. I'm very concerned about light pollution and dark sky lighting, and I hope we're moving towards getting this county dark sky compliant as signs fail and get improved. I don't see any direct language addressing dark sky lighting, and I wonder if that's been considered or if I'm missing it. I know here on page 27, we're under illumination. The only thing I see that might kind of point in the direction of addressing it just says it's 4D, external illumination shall be by a steady, stationary light source, static in color, shielded and directed either downward or solely at the sign. I don't see that language having enough teeth to stop light, from spilling into, where it doesn't need to be. I don't know if you can clarify.
It's much stronger than what we have now. This
Well,
section is
sure.
actually largely new. We have regulations right now that say, obviously, that you can't interfere with traffic signals and that kind of thing, but
Right.
we don't have any actual, let's say we don't have any actual clear language right now in Chapter 8 about downlighting. We've struggled with the dark sky regulations, and the Resource Planning Committee, whenever a conditional use permit comes to them, always puts on a condition about downlighting and things like that. But we've been hearing from more and more developers, it's actually very hard for them to find things to find products that can meet the requirements that we have in the zoning ordinance in other sections right now with lighting, and so that's kind of why we left this section with the language that's there, but it is stronger than what we have in the chapter now.
Okay, and then under the definition section, I do see in red, so I'm assuming that's new, and that's on page 34, beacon lighting, any source of electric light facing upwards. So I see it as a defined term, but I didn't see it showing up anywhere in the language.
Beacon lighting is in, and I should have clarified the font colors, and I'll do that in a second, but beacon lighting is included as something that's not allowed if you look at the list of things that's prohibited in the chapter.
Okay,
So the reason I didn't put the entire new Chapter 8 in red, even though it's all new language, and that's what we normally do with language, is because it's the entire chapter. The rest of it, once you get past Chapter 8 into the Chapter 13 amendments to the definition section, and then the other areas where we can no longer have different rules for different types of uses for their sign sizes, then we went with the regular convention where red with overstrike means we're deleting it, red means we're adding it, and black means that's what's there now.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So beacon lighting is not allowed anymore?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Dan?
I didn't really read this that closely, but you brought up the LED lights. If a sign is internally lit and on all the time, that's still allowed, isn't it?
You mean like a neon sign?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story. I use the name, when we put that big Ace Hardware sign up, the city ordinance said that you had light over the top like that, or light from the bottom up. And we went to, and this thing is lit internally with LED lights. LED lights doesn't mean it's moving. We had to get special permission to allow us to light the sign internally with LED. And I had to explain that it's a lot cheaper, they last a lot longer, they don't use energy and et cetera, and they eventually allowed it. So you don't want to limit using LED lighting.
Light bulbs, right.
But the,
Well,
Yeah,
lighting
right.
bulbs.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't want to eliminate lighting by LED. You want to eliminate the signs that change.
that move and change
Yeah.
and, right,
So I don't know,
yeah, I'd have to
I
find the
honestly didn't
exact.
read it that closely, but you don't want to limit lighting with LED lights. That's what I'm saying, I guess.
So I think the prohibition, let me find it right now. What it says, and I don't have your, it's in, I can give you the section, it's 8051, I'm sorry, 8052 is what just caught my eye. That, so animated, and I'm not going to read every word, but whether you're animated, flashing, scrolling, flashing, that's not, those are things that are not allowed, which includes but isn't limited to electronic variable message and multiple message signs. And then all of those types of signs are defined by the state statute. So yes, I probably should not have used the phrase LED when I said that those were prohibited. I meant,
It's on your page
electronic,
25.
like, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
So just as a reminder, basically, because of the court cases that occurred, the department went back and reviewed the ordinance as it pertains to the court cases. During that discussion, there were a wide variety, along with RPC, a wide variety of other things that should be cleaned up, and they will be working on. This was an effort to get something in place as quick as reasonably possible that met the state and federal regulations issues. There's already an understanding there's a wide variety of items that needs to be addressed later on. But right now, they wanted to get something. So if we actually tried to make any kind of change to this today, that would
Right, we don't want to do that.
An effort here is to get something back on the books that basically does not throw out the entire ordinance.
Or leave us
due to one.
ordinance less if you, yeah.
Yes, we become ordinance less.
Yeah.
We'll go to the voter board since this is an ordinance.
We should have made a half-hour meeting.
Every time they say it, it's really.
Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you.
Pass the vote of 20 yes, 1 no.
Oh.
Don't you have lighting
Third time.
Okay, moving right along, new business, none. Oral committee reports. I want to make mention of oral committee reports. This was brought up at the recent admin committee meeting, that there is a feeling that we are not necessarily getting pertinent information soon enough or often enough as we should. The oral committee reports, I'm pointing out, is on here so that any committee can make a report of functions or projects or something that they have going on, or they can be questioned by a supervisor. So in the future, if you want to think about, you want some information about something that's happening, you don't think you're getting the information, this would be the opportune time to ask that committee to give you a report, an oral report on that particular project or issue. Okay? Laura?
And if correct, it should be the chair of the committee giving that report, correct?
Anybody?
Susan?
And part of the discussion was, I asked for communication to be put on the agenda of the admin, and it was pointed out by a member of the admin committee is, if you're going to ask something of the committee chairman that's technical or detailed, would be really nice to give them a heads up so they can think about it and look on their notes or whatever before they come here, and not put them on the spot. But secondly, I would challenge people on the board who weren't at the admin to think about things that could be done to help them keep up with what's going on, even on the committees they're not on. And they may have suggestions that we didn't discuss, and they could share them with Ken or with David, or share them with somebody on admin or whatever. But it was kind of a general feeling that I've heard from people as well as myself, that we are not always up to date on what's happening in committees that we're not on, even if we read the committee minutes. So hopefully that can be improved.
So that being said, if anybody is on a committee that would like to make any type of oral report today, now would be an opportune time to do that.
Can I make one? I'm on a committee. So I just wanted to make one report, and again, part of this report, but also you can modify where we're going with it. But obviously, we did the retreat, or not the retreat, but the trip up to Washington Island, which I thought was very good. But I did have some supervisors say, okay, well, what are we actually doing next? So my intention, and there's two ways we can handle this. You could request that it's on our next agenda, that we could discuss it as the full body. Or the other option would be is to bring it forward through, if we're going to look at the one option, we need to get an architect on board to actually look at the potential cost in reusing that building that's existing. So that process would be is actually going to Facilities and Parks and requesting authorization to get an architect on board. Depending on that price, if it's under 10,000, it would still run through finance. If it'd be above 10,000, it'd ultimately come to this body. So there's really two ways for us to move forward in terms of that. Again, we could put it on a future agenda so the entire board can discuss how we want to move forward with those options on Washington Island. Or again, depending on what your pleasure is, I could run that through Facilities and Parks and ask for authorization to get an architect on board to determine costs of using the existing building that's there.
What's our time frame on this, in particular with this building? The reason I ask is, I hear discussion amongst us on the way back and et cetera on the building, and if we're gonna get into a big project and not have the town board along with us, maybe we don't even want to go down that road and waste the money of getting an architect to look into it, So maybe we should discuss on the county board level whether we want to even start going down that road of that big of a project without the town board participation. That's, I guess that.
How many board members were able to make it? I wasn't able to.
3 days left.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just the
3
days
days.
that weren't there.
18.
3 days were gone.
Sent the memo every day.
Wow.
We had 18 attended.
Weren't you guys lucky? It was a short meeting, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Maybe the chairman wasn't there either?
And you missed lunch.
We had
Oh, I'm
18,
sorry, but-
18 in attendance.
18, not bad. No, I'm sorry, I would have been, but my obligations kept me out.
Anybody else?
I will say I would like to, I agree with Dan, I would like to see a county board level open discussion about it.
Okay, we'll put it on the next agenda.
I'll just echo those sentiments as well, thank you. Same, I agree with Dan.
We might go 2 days.
Bring your lunch.
Review committee minutes.
Oh, good point, yeah, it's budget.
Review vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements, next regular county board meeting, November 12th and 13th if necessary. We will be talking compensation, I'm sure. Anyway, it's at 9 a.m. Yes?
Yeah, just another announcement. I had the privilege to be a part of the Local Government Leadership Academy. That was an 8-month training alternating between every other month, being in Stevens Point for a day and a half, and then doing through Zoom or a conference, like via certain, like a Skype, the alternating month. So that, I do believe the deadline is coming near. If there's any county supervisors that are interested, I do believe there was 2, Vinny, I invited Vinny to come learn about it as one of the county supervisors, and I do believe I've been a county clerk. So the information is on WCA website. You can get more information on it. I highly recommend it. I think it's very broad, opens your mind, also helps for communications, leadership qualities, and understanding different people's perspectives to be an effective leader. So I do believe that training cost is at $1,200, and with the nice discussion today, I do believe that would be in your 2,000 cap. So since that was not outside the ambassador program, but deadline I do believe is October 31st for registration. And if you'd like to talk to me more about that and what that all entailed, I'll be happy to talk.
The meeting per diem, meeting per diem code is 1029.
1029?
1029.
It's not a 3-digit?
No, that'd be 4.
Well, you can't count past 3 days.
Well, you know.
It's a lot of change.
That's what my computers are for.
You did that for 2 hours.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further business to be discussed, and I think we discussed plenty today,
Second.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
We're going to the.